Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, Brunning, Bruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Tuesday and we are going to shift our pre-draft dynasty rankings from running backs to pass catchers. We'll be looking at number 50 to 26. Dennis, after a windy weekend where it felt like the jet stream was trying to push us into Kansas, I'm enjoying a nice, 60-degree kind of calm wind day here. It actually feels almost spring-like. I hope you are getting some spring-like weather.
I am. It was high 60s, 70s. Got a little overcast today, slight sprinkle, cooled off a bit, but I can sense spring in the air. They came today and measured the countertops, and they're supposed to be out to install those next Monday. Then we can do backsplash. The appliances were delivered Saturday, I think it was. Maybe it was yesterday. So we got those in-house. We bought the flooring. It's going to be great weather to do home renovations in.
Yeah, my wife and I had looked potentially getting our, because we got the deck finished, getting the deck furniture last weekend. And I looked at the forecast and saw a high wind warning of wind, 65 miles an hour blowing whatever I put on the deck right through my plate glass windows. And I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'm going to wait a weekend. But it does feel like it's getting closer to that season where you can kind of sit outside a little bit. The days are getting light. It's nice when you leave work and it doesn't feel like the middle of the night. It's also getting a little bit light in the morning. Doesn't feel like I'm leaving for work in the middle of the night. We're getting that breath of life. The draft is just a couple of weeks away. They actually started a spring football league. It's kind of a lull period in the NFL. I actually did watch pieces of the XFL, or I guess it's now USFL. I found your boy Kiki Kuti.
Yeah,
he's hanging around out there.
There's I've been turning it on. I want to, kind of keep up. There's a few Buckeyes in the league, not too many. But overall, it's, the play hasn't been bad from what I've seen. It's obviously it's not the NFL. I think one thing the UFL is doing is they're not trying to sell themselves as an NFL, but I think they're putting themselves in a position to become a feeder league for, backbenchers, especially with the importance on quarterbacks in the NFL now looking at, teams having a third quarterback that doesn't count against your roster on game day, things like that. I think watching the development, how the teams in the UFL, how they approach their offensive schemes, because I think that if they want to be successful, they need to make their offensive schemes NFL offensive scheme friendly so that those players aren't having to relearn a whole lot of stuff if they make an NFL team.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. They've done everything they can to help these stick, and it's a good second chance. Like I saw Birmingham has Matt Corral. We had talked about him just a few weeks ago, a guy that, got a little snake bit, not getting an NFL shot. Maybe some of these guys work their way in. I mean, PJ Walker has managed to hang around the NFL for the last few years. Your boy Donald Parham, those were guys that came out of that first iteration of spring football that, kind of made a splash and got in. So be curious to see if we get any guys moving in, especially, at some of the shallower positions. A position that isn't shallow right now and is certainly about to get a lot more rich after the draft is wide receiver. And I don't know about you, but going through and trying to figure out where to put guys and everything, little bit of a challenge as we're going through, and I think it's only going to get more challenging as we go through the draft. Wide receiver is probably a position where you could see even the top 25, even the top 10 maybe changing depending on landing spots, more so than, say, with the running back class that we were looking at. Quarterbacks, you always get a couple merged in there.
I mean, to be fair, it doesn't get difficult until you get to wide receiver 6.
Well, today we're going 50 to 26, and Dennis, I'll let you kick it off. Why don't you give us 50 to 41, your first 10?
So I was, I've been playing around, and there's so much emphasis on youth, and I'm trying to, couch things in the hashtag 2 to 3 year window with Dynasty, and because we've got at the top end, there's some phenomenal young receivers. But when you start to get back there in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, it's like we've got some veterans that are really still putting up good numbers, but they're older. It's like, when is the drop-off going to happen? So that's really been my challenge. And then mesh that with offensive scheme changes, head coaching, offensive coordinator changes, and there being some real unknowns in that area. So at number 50, I've got Tyler Lockett. I'm not comfortable with what's going on out there in Washington. Seattle may very well draft a rookie. Geno Smith playing for we've got one more position group to go. I'm going to be talking about the first-time NFL coordinator that doesn't have a ton of college coordinator experience either. Playing for a defensive-minded head coach, it scares me. Tyler Lockett's at 50. Curtis Samuel changing teams, going to a pass-happy team that jettisoned their top 2 wide receivers at 49. Probably too low, but I do expect them to bring in somebody to be the top dog there. Curtis Samuel is not a wide receiver 1 for your team. 48, Josh Downs. I liked what I saw with the connection with him and Anthony Richardson. He plays a really great complementary role to what Michael Pittman does. The real question will be, how much do they rely on Jonathan Taylor running, and how much will Anthony Richardson actually run the ball himself? At 47, I got Jameson Williams. I looked for excuses to put him higher. To be fair, this may be too high. He's a deep threat wide receiver with a quarterback that doesn't throw a ton of deep shots. And he's paired with a target hog wide receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown, and a target hog tight end, and a target hog in Laporta, and a target hog running back in Jahmyr Gibbs. He's probably a guy that I'm nervous about. 46, Jacoby Myers. All going to come down to the quarterback situation. I know that Devontae Adams going to get his. 45, Darnell Mooney. He landed in Atlanta. They got Kirk Cousins. We've seen Cousins have 2 wide receivers and a tight end be fantasy viable. This could be great news for Darnell Mooney. 44, DeAndre Hopkins. This is, when I talked about the veterans, this was one of them. Is he at the drop-off point? Is he over the cliff and we're just waiting for it to really show up? How much of it was, the Will Levis, Ryan Tannehill, Malik Willis quarterback stuff going on last year? That's going to be a real question. 43, Cortland Sutton, another team with quarterback questions. And when I talk to my friend Matt, he tells me there's head coach questions too. I like Sutton, but he's a big receiver, had some injuries, getting older. I think he's 27, 28 now?
Probably.
I like what he brings to the table. Just a lot of questions about that team. 42, Marquise Brown, looking for a renaissance at Kansas City. This may be a situation where he plays himself into another contract with Cincinnati. I think we can see the beginning of the end with Travis Kelce, and we'll see how the offense changes, what happens with Rashee Rice's off-field situation. It's a prime market. It's a situation where I could see Marquise Brown start off hot because Rashee Rice is suspended. Rice comes back. Next thing you know, Marquise Brown is playing that MVS role, getting deep shots, and being more efficient at it, if I'm being honest. And at 41, I got Rashid Shaheed. I have questions about Derek Carr. I think Chris Olave is the unquestioned number one. Could I see Shaheed being a top 36 wide receiver? I think I could, maybe top 30 even. He's put up some big games. I think he's earned the wide receiver 2 spot there. And with Foster Moreau and Juwan Johnson, they've got inside guys. So, and Alvin Kamara for that matter. So potentially he could be the wide receiver 2 in New Orleans, and we'll see how the offense shakes out with Derek Carr and Chris Olave there.
Yeah, he's not a guy I have. You have a couple players I don't. I have a couple players you don't. I also think we're going to get to it pretty quickly here. You and I have kind of an opposite thought about which Chargers receiver we're betting on. I don't feel good about mine, but it's a new day there.
To be fair, I'm betting on the Chargers receiver that isn't on the team yet.
Yeah, and that could shift a lot of things. For me, that's a little bit where I'm at with Shaheed. I actually think the Saints are a prime candidate to get a wide receiver in the draft because I think they want somebody else opposite Chris Olave, and I'm not sure that Shaheed is going to be more than what he is. It's possible. You lay out a very good case. If they don't go wide receiver in the draft, I think you really seriously have to start thinking about, at least in the short term, the options. I can't remember. Did they bring Taysom Hill back? That's what always screws things too, because
I haven't heard anybody sign him, so I'm going to say yes.
Okay, I'll go mine number 50, and I'm just going to say 50 and 49 and even 48. You don't have them in yours, and I wish I was you. They all pained me to put them in there. But Gabe Davis got a huge contract from Jacksonville, and when they couldn't get Calvin Ridley back, I still think Christian Kirk is the best option. They're another team. It wouldn't shock me if they took somebody in the draft, in which case, Davis is right down there. He'll certainly end up falling out of the top 50 when we merge in rookies, no matter what. But for now, that's kind of where I have him. The same thing, number 49. You know that I am no fan of Jerry Jeudy. I think that he's been overrated since he came into the NFL. But he has an opportunity in Cleveland, and them tossing out a huge contract like that is not something that can totally be ignored. I had liked what I was seeing out of Elijah Moore as a third option in that kind of passing offense. It's fair to wonder if they're going to pass a little bit more. We've seen, Deshaun Watson be able to get things going. Deshaun Watson hasn't always had great rapport with the tight end. So does David Njoku end up taking a little bit of a step back? Was he doing better because of the different quarterbacks? I think there's potential for Jerry Jeudy enough that I left him there. And number 48, the third of this trio is Jahan Dotson, who was a first-round pick. With Samuel gone, is a clear number 2 with Terry McLaurin. They could take somebody else. They also have Cliff Kingsbury coming in. You think it could lead to a more robust passing offense. They have a rookie quarterback coming in. His second year was not very good. I'm kind of torn, but the potential for Dotson is there. So he ends up just kind of sliding in. I have Tyler Lockett at 47, redid his contract to stay. It's fair to wonder about questions there. I think, it's hard to completely count him out, especially when you're talking about like a 2 to 3 year kind of window, because we've seen him continue to be productive there in Seattle. I have Curtis Samuel at 46. He is by far and away the best receiver on their roster right now. He's also a guy that gets involved in other ways, and I'm wondering if it's that kind of a weapon they were looking to bring as they kind of reshaped their offense a little bit down the stretch, which made a big, alpha wide receivers and big down the field receivers a little less necessary than they might have been in a previous scheme. I would imagine Buffalo adds somebody in the draft, but hey, you never know. And Curtis Samuel, we have seen him be a consistent producer. He would outproduce Jahan Dotson when he was in Washington. They're behind McLaurin. He outproduced DJ Moore a couple of seasons when he was in Carolina. He's not a name that feels sexy, but he does continue to produce and find ways to contribute. 45, I have Josh Downs. We had talked about this when we talked about Indianapolis. I'm betting on him over Alec Pierce. Still have questions. We're going to have to see, what is the passing volume like there? I, like you, have DeAndre Hopkins at 44. I think he's still a good veteran asset. We saw him have some decent games with Will Levis, but they invested a lot of money in Calvin Ridley. They have Tony Pollard, who will probably be catching out of the backfield. They still have Chig Okonkwo. I just don't know that there's a ton to go around. And I think there doesn't feel like a huge market for DeAndre Hopkins, who's also going into a contract year, I believe, this year, because he signed that 2-year deal with Tennessee. What happens to him long term? He's one of those guys. It's fair to have some long term questions right now. 43, I have Jameson Williams. You lay out a great case for caution. He was a first round pick, though, for a reason. Josh Reynolds is gone.
I want him to be good.
Well, and they've consistently used three people. With Josh Reynolds moving on, I think there's a great opportunity for him to be third. Unquestionably, he's third or fourth option in the passing game if you think about Jahmyr Gibbs. But Detroit has had a pretty robust offense, so it can still be good. 42. So this is where you and I took different tracks on the Chargers. Quentin Johnson, I think a lot of what we discussed about part of the reason there was such a struggle in the rookie year is it didn't seem like Kellen Moore and the offensive scheme they were running seemed to know how to use him exactly. They were trying to make him another Mike Williams. Jim Harbaugh would be more familiar, having been in the college ranks, with what he was doing. Is passing going to be a big part of what the Chargers are doing? How many? It's not a question of if, it's a question to me of how many pass catchers they're going to get in the draft. But, Quentin Johnson was a first-round pick. A new scheme may actually be beneficial to him since it didn't seem like he really fit in the old scheme. And I still think, I've thought Josh Palmer has been a quality contributor, but I think Quentin Johnson is probably the better receiver on there. And then number 41 for me is Darnell Mooney. I like the landing spot. I think he has a chance to thrive. He'll be kind of the number 2. I don't have a lot of fear about Rondale Moore. Obviously, London and Pitts will be kind of big focus. But if Kirk Cousins comes back to being the Kirk Cousins we've seen, they could put up some decent passing numbers.
Yeah, I think I like Mooney. I think he's a guy I'm willing to take a shot on this year. But I think he's going to be the number 4 target because I think Bijan's going to be the other guy there. I'm starting at number 40. I got Chris Godwin, and it feels egregiously low. He's younger than Mike Evans, and he's had some good seasons. I probably need to get him. I got to figure out a reason why he should be behind Mike Evans. That's other than, man, Evans just keeps doing. Evans is going into his 11th season, going for his 11th straight 1,000-yard season. But I'm just not sold on the offensive changes after we saw what Canales did to Geno, and then we saw what happened the year after. We've seen Baker flash for stretches with a couple teams and then crap the bed. Well, he ended up resurrecting his career in Tampa with Dave Canales as the offensive coordinator, Canales has moved on to Carolina. I am terrified of what's going to happen to the Tampa offense. So I've got Chris Godwin at 40. I have Romeo Doubs at 39. I'm a little concerned that I should have him behind Jaden Reed. I've got Reed a little bit higher. Reed is flash, but there's, it just feels like when you count Doubs out, he just keeps producing. So I got Romeo Doubs at 39. Wouldn't be surprised to see him higher. Keenan Allen at 38. I think Keenan, there's no reason to expect him not to continue to perform on his end of the ball. But what's going to happen with Caleb Williams? And he's also got we've seen Allen be very productive with good wide receivers across from him. But I think this is the first time that Allen has been in a situation where he might be the wide receiver 2, not the wide receiver 1. And if the Bears with a rookie quarterback aren't throwing the ball as much, it looks like they're going to run more 12 tight end with the signing of Gerald Everett and to pair with Cole Kmet. So I'm a little bit nervous. I wouldn't be surprised if Allen finishes as a wide receiver 2 or even a wide receiver 1 based on his history, but he's getting up there in years. 37, Zay Flowers. I think he's the receiver you want in Baltimore. Just have a ton of concerns with the signing of Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson's ability to run the ball and their overall lack of passing prowess, that he's going to be much more than a mid to low wide receiver 3. I've got Josh Palmer at 36. You make a strong case for Quentin Johnston. But if I may, the Chargers did not try to use Quentin Johnston in the fashion that they used Mike Williams. They tried to, I take that back. They did. They weren't smart enough to get him the ball at the line of scrimmage. But Josh Palmer, he's produced every time he's gotten an opportunity. And now he's got an opportunity to be the one. Is he going to be, a wide receiver 1? Probably not. But I think we all expect Harbaugh to run a conservative, run-oriented offense. Palmer is the kind of guy I think that is going to get open, be reliable, 10 yards a pop. He isn't going to have a super crazy yards per catch. He's just going to be reliable, do the right things, be where he's supposed to. Have Jaden Reed at 35. Wouldn't surprise me if he finished behind Romeo Doubs, but Reed did flash. 34 is Jackson Smith and Jigba. I know that Seattle signed Tyler Lockett to a new deal, but I think we saw that Smith and Jigba just has he's got a lot more juice. Is he going to overtake DK Metcalf? No, I don't think anybody is going to tell you that. But Smith and Jigba is a phenomenal wide receiver. He knows what his role is. He knows how to do it. He can play some outside, super, super productive inside. I think he's going to have a good year. Hopefully my fears about that Seattle offense are wrong. Where are we going? We're going to 31, right?
Yeah, 31.
Okay. 33, Jordan Addison. Another position that scares me. He's got Justin Jefferson there, but he put up good numbers. He flashed. What is Minnesota going to do at the quarterback position? They brought in Aaron Jones at running back. They traded for TJ Hawkinson. They've got Justin Jefferson. They did let KJ Osborne go. So it seems like Addison has established himself as the clear number 2 wide receiver in Minnesota. He should be able to get 100-plus targets as the wide receiver 2. But who's throwing him the ball? Are you comfortable with Sam Darnold? Are you comfortable with Bo Nix? Are you comfortable with J.J. McCarthy? Like, where where are they going quarterback wise? It gets a little sketchy there. 32, I got Rashee Rice. I think he's going to miss some time. Now it feels like, now we have some maturity questions. He's on the best offense in football. Let's play out. I think he's going to be the wide receiver 1 there. I think Marquise Brown will provide a little more consistent deep threat element, but I think Rashee Rice, once all the legal stuff plays out, he's going to return to be the wide receiver 1. And as we see Kelsey's career wind down, I feel like we see Rice sort of ascend into a true wide receiver 1 position. I just don't think we're there yet. I think we still got a couple years for that to happen. And then at 31, this was a guy I was, the more I looked at my rankings, I literally, the last move I made while we were going through the intro and stuff was to move this guy from unranked all the way up to 31. And that's Brandon Cooks. I get it. He's a little bit older, but in a 2 or 3 year window on a very highly prolific offense, and I get the concerns that they may be moving on from Dak. That's all legitimate. But Brandon Cooks, they let Michael Gallup go. Brandon Cooks is the number 2 there. If I have a choice, I get it. You got Jake Ferguson at tight end. They've got to work out the running back situation. Jalen Tolbert started to come on, and he's likely to be the wide receiver 3, unless they go and draft a wide. Like they had Michael Gallup coming off a good year and Amari Cooper coming off a good year, and they drafted CeeDee Lamb because he was there. So you never know what's going to happen with the Cowboys. But I think that Brandon Cooks still has a couple good years left in him. He's a very solid player, still has some explosiveness. I've got Cooks at 31.
Yeah, I think my argument with Cooks wouldn't be so much age or any of that, as he just didn't look like a fit for them last year. I'm trying to see where it says he finished as wide receiver 38. He just felt unplayable for a lot of last season, which, I'm looking at his week-to-week scores. It looks like there was one huge game and a couple of medium games. He did better down the second half of the season. I should see. I forgot. I didn't take out week 17. Or week 18. You never count. So let's see what that drops him down to. Wide receiver 41. So that's still better than I remembered. I don't know if this will make you feel better or worse, but do you know who the offensive coordinator was for Baker Mayfield when he walked off the street and into the starting lineup for the Rams that got him that Tampa Bay job?
Probably the guy that's in Tampa right now.
It is indeed the guy that's in Tampa Bay right now. Liam Cohen was the offensive coordinator there in LA. Then went to Kentucky, where his teams averaged 50 points a game. So that feels a little more promising to me than maybe. Well, but it feels they're in the SEC though, so they had to play some top tier football teams too. So that's pretty nice average and record. It didn't Will Levis come from Kentucky? Yeah. So with his mayonnaise eating self, I don't know. That might make me feel a little better than what we got left with Seattle. I want to believe that Baker's better than Geno. For me at number 40, I have Courtland Sutton. You hit on a lot of things about that. I think he's still by far the best receiver on his team. I don't know how much I believe in Denver or how much his coaches believe in him, which is a problem. But he was really good last year, even with everything falling apart around him. They dealt Jerry Jeudy. Tim Patrick hasn't played in 2 seasons after major injuries. I'm not that impressed with Marvin Mims, and Josh Reynolds is a good possession guy, so Sutton's going to remain their best target. I have Marquise Brown at 39, just a little bit higher than you. I actually moved him up after some of what happened last week and moved Rice down a little bit. we'll have to see how that plays out. But I don't get that encouraged the more that comes out about Rice's situation and involvement. I have Chris Godwin at 38, pretty close to where you had him. Kind of the same things. I wanted to put him higher, but it just feels like that's probably the right spot because, I think Mike Evans re-signed there and is still the better option, had better chemistry with Baker too. I have Keenan Allen at 37. You mentioned for the first time he probably won't be the number one receiver on his team. If they bag one of the top three rookies at number 9, he might not even be the number 2 receiver on his team. I believe he's also going into a contract year. The Bears don't have much in the way of depth behind them. So, right now, Moore, Allen, Cole Kmet, you would figure they factor in. They also are another team that added a good pass catcher in DeAndre Swift in the backfield. But going to see how all that shakes out. I have Romeo Doubs at 36. I like you have Jaden Reed above, but I don't have him a ton above. I don't think you did either. Those feel like the best 2 out of that Green Bay group for me. 35, I have Nico Collins. I dropped him a little bit. It looks like we both have all 3 Texans receivers bunched together. You have them all 3. It looks like bunched up a little bit higher and in a different order. I actually thought adding Diggs might impact Collins more. And I also thought that Tank Dell was probably the one I was betting on over Collins before they made all these shifts. I have Zay Flowers at 34. I like what he did as a rookie. He's another one. He had, he's not going to end up getting charged, but he sure gave fantasy players and the Ravens a little bit of a scare with some of his off the field stuff. Then I have Jaden Reed at 33. Loved what we saw from him as a rookie. Think he's going to be a good contributor. And then I have Diggs here at 32. My second of the Texans. Kind of a big drop off for him. He's obviously on a 1-year deal. How he does this year, which you think he would be kind of focused and all in, hopefully, but how he does this year is going to have a big impact on him going forward. And I think there's a lot more uncertainty than there has been in years past. And then I have Christian Kirk at 31. I think he's been reliable and steady and a great contributor there in Jacksonville. Another guy that's not like the sexiest name on the board, but all he's done is produce since he signed that contract. So why don't you give us your top 5 in this group? 30 to 26.
So I have Mike Evans at 30, and I really labored over it because he just keeps putting up numbers, and him and Baker seem to have a connection. I hope for Evans' sake that Liam Cohen, makes them a thing for a couple more years at least. If he could put up 2 or 3 more 1,000-yard seasons, that would be just phenomenal to start your career with 12 or 13 1,000-yard seasons. I don't think he would be considered better than Jerry Rice, but to do something like that Jerry Rice never did, it's just a completely completely different stratosphere of production. So I've got Evans at 30. I've got Calvin Ridley at 29. I think he's in a position where if that team takes off, he's the number 1 wide receiver there. And he has, I get it, he's 29 years old. He's probably he came into the league a little bit older and missed a couple years with his gambling stuff. So I think he's got something to prove. And if I'm Calvin Ridley, I'm betting on myself. Thought I'd get at least a giggle. And
I like gambling. Hey, at least he bet on himself better than Kayshon Boutte.
I'd like to see, Ridley and Will Levis develop a connection that isn't necessarily at the expense of DeAndre Hopkins. They've got Pollard and Spears in the backfield and Okonkwo at tight end. So it seems like Ridley and Hopkins, are the top receiving threats, and that they'll be,
it won't be
they
at
might
the
be
expense
bottom.
of Calvin. It'll be at the expense of Treylon Burks.
Right. That, you got to do something. Number 28, I got Amari Cooper. He just keeps producing, but it feels like they want to run the ball more. They've brought in Dante Foreman. Nick Chubb's coming back off the injury. Jerome Ford stepped up after Chubb's injury. I like where they're at with what they got going on. And even if they don't pass more, Cooper's going to be the beneficiary. At 27, I got Stephon Diggs. I don't know. I'm probably buying too hard into the second half of last year, but the way that Collins and Dell produced, they didn't need to bring in a stud wide receiver. They needed to bring in a guy they could rely on. And Diggs isn't. I think Collins is going to be the big downfield guy. I think Dell is the speed guy, and Diggs is the intermediate guy. And is he going to produce? Yeah, I think he will. But I think I'm going to go with the young guys over him. And then at 26, I got Christian Kirk. He's the top dog in Jacksonville. I think we saw when he was injured that it really affected the rest of the wide receiving crew. He's the guy that he didn't need Zay Jones to be healthy, to be productive like Calvin Ridley did. So I think Christian Kirk is sitting there with the ability to, maybe be a high-end wide receiver too.
So you and I have a lot of the same guys in this kind of range, just in a little bit different order. You had three of the younger guys in your, 36 to 31, whereas I dropped Kirk and Diggs. And I have Jackson Smith and Jigba at 30, Jordan Addison at 29, Rashee Rice at 28. A little bit, I like their youth. I like their talent. Situations, give you a little pause. But, for Dynasty, I put them over. I think the situation for Stephon Diggs gives me pause too. So it made sense as I was rearranging to kind of drop him a little bit further. Then I have Mike Evans at 27, a little bit higher than you. But right in the same range. I'm hopeful, if you're talking about the 2 to 3 year window, signing a 2-year contract sounds like he wants to finish his career with Tampa Bay. I'm with you. It'd be awesome if he never had a season with less than 1,000 yards and kind of walked away just having put up those numbers. I like the potential of him and Baker being back together. And, I think if we were talking about redraft, I'd probably have him up in the top 24 because I think there's a good chance there. And then I have Ridley at 26, and it wasn't always consistently great in Jacksonville. There are some questions about scheme and role, and maybe that happens again. But the aggressiveness of Tennessee going out and getting him, he's a younger guy than DeAndre Hopkins. I think he can slide in there and be a one, and that could actually end up being a pretty great thing. And he also, he got a 4-year deal, so you get a little bit of a sense of security as well. So he tops this group for me. Before we get out of here, let me give you a couple of questions. Who is somebody that didn't make your top 50 that you could see making their way in?
So I got a couple guys that I liked. Marvin Mims is one. He's fast. He didn't touch the ball a lot last year, but when he did, he made plays. Khalil Shakir in Buffalo looks like he's going to have an opportunity to get some volume. We'll see who they bring in the draft. It's probably going to be somebody. But the guy I really settled on was Dontavian Wicks in Green Bay. So Green Bay brought in a whole bunch of young wide receivers with Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, and Dontavian Wicks. And Wicks was the least heralded of them. And he just seemed to get the job done. When Watson went down, when they needed a tough first down, they could go to Wicks. I don't know if he's going to be able to make the rise, but I like him as a big wide receiver that is he's a guy that just is going out there and making an opportunity for himself. So I like Dontavian Wicks as somebody. It's going to come at somebody's expense, and whether that means another guy got injured or somebody just didn't produce and he overtook them. I like Dontavian Wicks as a guy that maybe should have been in the top 50, probably at 50, but an interesting nonetheless.
I'm kind of with one of the ones you went off, which is Khalil Shakir, and I feel like it's been a roller coaster of emotions. I really liked the way he ended 2023, and then when they brought in Curtis Samuel, I felt like that might block some opportunities, and then they traded away Diggs, and it's like, oh, well, maybe he's there. I'm prepared to get hurt again when Buffalo drafts like 3 wide receivers over the 2nd to 4th round. But I still can't let go. I thought he fit really well and was starting to kind of spark with Josh Allen last year. Who is somebody in the 26 to 50 range that you think could make a leap up into the top 25 or maybe even the top 12 if things break right?
So things would have to break super right, as in one of the young wide receivers would have to take over. But I could see Dobbs or Jaden Reed taking a jump into the top 25. But I'm going to hang my hat on Calvin Ridley. I know he's a little bit older, but I feel like he's going to step up and become the guy over the next few years there. And they're not going to be as run heavy. They've had a coaching change. It's going to be, I think, more of they want to see what they have with Will Levis. Can he control that big arm? And so Calvin Ridley is going to get a shot. I think that he could slide up into the top 25, top 12. I think that might be pushing it. Over the next 3 years, I don't see Mike Evans as a guy, but Rashee Rice would be the guy, I think, if I had to put my money on somebody in this second 25 to move into the wide receiver 1 group, I would probably go with Rashee Rice. As much about talent as it is about situation and being paired with Patrick Mahomes.
The one I'm going to go with is Christian Kirk, and I constantly struggle with where I'm going to rank Christian Kirk, and I probably always drop him a little bit lower because it just doesn't stand out to me. I do not believe big in Gabe Davis, which probably makes us laugh because of the two of us. I was the only one that put him in the top 50, and I think that they're going to eventually move on from Zay Jones. Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram just seem to fit that offense really well. And he has such great rapport with Trevor Lawrence. If Jacksonville is going to continue to remain viable as a playoff contender in what's suddenly becoming a pretty loaded division, it's going to be because those guys continue to click. And I could see that maybe in too low again. On the flip side, who is somebody in this range that has you the most nervous?
26 through 50. Probably, Josh Palmer makes me nervous because of the expectation they're going to bring in a pedigreed receiver and install him as the wide receiver 1. I'm not overly concerned with Quentin Johnston. Having him at wide receiver 36, it seems like when he's given the opportunity, he produces, but he also doesn't seem to hold up for long stretches. So that does make me a little bit nervous.
For me, I'm going to say it's Rashee Rice. Prior to the last couple of weeks, I actually had him up in my top 25. I loved what he did in his rookie season. I think that Kansas City's been looking for a reliable receiver, but this off-field stuff it could end up being nothing. He could end up just getting some kind of a small suspension to start the season. Could end up being a lot worse. You don't even know how the whole criminal process is going to play out. It feels like every time he comes out and gives a new statement, or his lawyer gives a new statement, it gets worse. Somebody had a meme on Twitter, Rashi Rice's lawyer, after every meeting with the DA, and it's Lando Calrissian saying this deal gets worse all the time. And, it has certainly felt a little bit like that as details come out. You don't know what's going to come of it. It's going to dominate a lot of the off season. And Kansas City is a team that's won back-to-back Super Bowls and really wants to go get a third one, and probably is in a position, we've seen them before with guys who have produced a lot more in like a Kareem Hunt, where at some point in time they're like, this isn't worth it for us, and makes a clean cut. Right. So those kind of things go a little bit in the back of your mind, especially, there's also been a lot of conjecture. I've seen more than one mock draft that have the Chiefs landing either a T. Higgins or a Brandon Ayuk in a draft day trade. And you get something like that. And I think that blows a little bit out of who's going to be number one, especially when you're talking about then having Kelsey and you have a burner and in Marquise Brown. So just feels like there's a lot of potential, but also a lot of volatility around him for me. And since it's April,
I feel like Brandon Ayuk is going to get traded to Buffalo. We've seen.
Well, that's the other one.
T.
Higgins has been rumored to Buffalo, although I just don't. I
don't see Higgins because they're AFC and they play each other in the playoffs. But the 49ers, they're NFC. It's like get him out of the NFC, send him off to Buffalo, the AFC.
Draft day is going to be exciting. Next few weeks, a lot of potential. Well, that'll do it for us today. We will be back on Friday looking at the top 25 pre-draft at the wide receiver position, which ought to be really fun. I don't know who we're going to have at 1 or 2. It's really hard to deduce who might be eligible for those positions. But Dennis, if people are looking for some way to fill up the long, lonely Wednesday and Thursday, what can they do?
They could recommend podcast platforms to me since Google Podcast is shut down.
Did it finally go? Did you open it and you're like,
this no longer exists? I was like, God damn it.
Do you have an iPhone or an Android phone?
I have an Android.
We'll pray for you.
Yeah. So go to your favorite podcast platform, seek out the Fantasy Football Roundtable, hit that subscribe button, give us a like, leave us a rating and a review. Get us back into the top 100 over there in England and Canada. We appreciate that.
You might have to go to. Is it Spotify? Is the other?
Yeah, and I have a Spotify account because I do stuff with Caleb's band.
I think if I ever traded off iPhone, I'd probably be similarly lost to you because they just have the podcast app and it literally says podcast app and it's part of your phone.
Right.
They make it a lot easier. Well, that'll do it for us today. We will see you guys on Friday. Have a wonderful rest of your week.